Validation. Validation means finding what is right, finding what is correct, valid, makes sense, of course, when you have that kind of course reaction. And there are several ways in DBT and dialectical behavior therapy where you're trying to do that. But the idea is your basic stance is you move to find what is right before you find what is wrong. And so one way to do it, and what I was hoping you guys were practicing, was validation by listening. Sometimes just a warm, attentive, alert presence, being kind of awake to the other person, is amazingly helpful in and of itself. So that the listening without having the fix and without pushing away, but just being there is super helpful. So that I would think of as level one, just listening, being awake. Fresh eyes, not hearing the story as if here we go again, look on your face. But a real, awake and present sort of experience. The other level, which we probably will practice just a little, is paraphrasing. And I think of it as not parrot phrasing, okay? So paraphrasing means saying back, in your own words, the essence of it, of what you heard, and really trying to be as close to the person's meaning, not add in anything, like not adding your interpretation, not turning it around, but also not, well, I hear you say, and then blah, blah, blah. So not being annoying. I don't know. I mean, my daughter communicates when I am annoying, when I'm paraphrasing, So you really want to stay close to the essence of what matters to the other person. And the reason I think of paraphrasing and why I was hoping and why I want to practice it is sometimes all that's needed for people to re-regulate is for you to be awake and attentive enough to say back that you're getting it, whatever they're saying. And that is organizing in and of itself. And if somebody does that for you, you just straighten yourself out. You just had to calm down and be listened and understood enough, like somebody's getting it. And then you reorganize. So validation is super important. The next level that I want to talk just a little bit about, because it's so related to how we all get into conflicts and why they persist and why we can't get out of them, has to do with reading accurately the unstated. Okay, this is kind of like mind reading, but in a good way. It's the accurate part that's important here, okay? So mind reading somebody else and looking for what is right. So this is the opposite of reading in the bad intentions. Oh, they mean to be manipulative. You know what I mean? So this is back to whoever was asking earlier, the judgments. If I was going to rephrase, so I'm sitting here and I'm feeling manipulated, I could use the question that was offered, what am I seeing or hearing that is making me feel that way? And I would say, okay, wait a second here. The way in which you are saying only part of the facts as you're asking me for permission to go is making me feel really uncomfortable. So that would be as opposed to you're manipulative. I would unpack it. Yes?
Do you say that out loud or do you think that?
I would. I've said it to my kiddo. I would say, listen, that look on your face and the slight skidding past when I ask who is going to be there is making me uncomfortable. You're only telling me, I'm not mind reading, you're only telling me the part of the story that will get me to say yes. I'm saying it in a non-judgmental way. So, but what can be really important here is and I'm going to have you kind of think about this for yourself in just a second, is sometimes what's not said is the important part. And the part that is hard, I think those of you who are more private people in here who just felt extremely uncomfortable that we were talking about our lives, like me, if we switched and I was in the audience, I would have been really uncomfortable. It would have been a real challenge to figure out, okay, what am I going to share and what am I not going to share? And it's just awkward, to talk about private stuff. I'm more on that end of private. But if I am talking, it feels really risky. And if you can read some of the stuff so I don't have to say it, it's a big help. And I would just say for many folk who are extremely emotionally dysregulated, you've been burned so badly, you are so sensitive about expressing stuff, that you learn to hide. And there's some stuff you actually don't even have words for. So it's like you're under a rock, or you're in a walled-in room, and you can see everybody on the other side, or worse sometimes, is like you feel like there's this plexiglass that's several inches thick, and you can't get out, and you can't put words on, and everybody's reading in and misinterpreting your, like what your intentions are and stuff. Like you were just able to do something, and now you're dysregulated, and now you can't, and everybody's interpreting that as you're self-sabotaging, or you don't really want it, or whatever is the interpretation. But from the inside, that's not what's happening. It's just you can't say it, It's very hard. So sometimes what this level of validation, it's being able to see the person under the rock and say what needs to be said. So do you know what I'm talking about? Those of you who are on the more private side probably know this. It's like you're sitting on the dock and you have this big problem, and the person is sitting beside you, and they're just quiet, and you're like, oh, thank God we don't have to talk. And then finally they say something like, it's really hard. And that's like all you need, because they're not trying to change you, and they're not trying to get you to talk and whatever, and then they just wait more. And then they say, because they're reading it, and they say, you're really worried about what it's going to be like when, whatever. They kind of read the worry, or they put the words to it that you can't quite say yourself. And then because they can see it, then you can kind of like peek out a little. It's safe. And so being able to do this type of validation creates the conditions of safety where the other person can kind of come out. It's like a turtle or something. I think sometimes with some of my people who have had the most difficulty, when you watch yourself, despite your best efforts, fall apart, despite your best efforts, fall apart, try school again, fail out, like put all your plans in place and then it blows up. Like when you watch yourself do that, you get where you don't want to talk about it anymore, You don't want kindness. You don't want anything. You're just so ashamed. You're just like, and so there's a certain way where if you can read that and then just think, if I was that person, what would I need? What would I say? That's this type of mind reading. Okay, it's finding what's right. Like, of course, that's how this is. Okay, and the reason why, does that make sense? Questions are okay. I think this is really important. The thing is, you have to be open to being wrong. Like sometimes you say under the rock, you're really worried, and the person under the rock says, in essence, no, that's not how I'm feeling. And you have to say, okay, back to translating, like that's not them being whatever. It's, you translate. So either, okay, so that's not how you're feeling, or maybe it's that I said the wrong word. You're not worried, you're slightly tense. Like sometimes you have to get the word so minimal, I'm just thinking of with teenagers. Like you have to say almost the opposite. Like you're not, it's not like you're uncomfortable. It's just, it's not going right. Like you have to translate. All right. The reason why I want to talk to you guys about this is sometimes what gets in our way in these conflict situations is we are avoiding our own vulnerability, our own sense of powerlessness. And so that when we talked initially about that sort of judgment, that initial moment, we don't want it, so we brace and we push away, or we move in to try to change it. Sometimes to stand open and just soothing breathing rhythm and not do our thing feels incredibly vulnerable. But operating from that position is super important. And so I want to give us a chance to talk about this. This is just a quote, if you want to read for yourself here for a second. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I can. Vulnerability is the underlying, ever-present, and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. To run from vulnerability is to run from the essence of our nature. The attempt to be invulnerable is the vain attempt to be something we are not, and most especially to close off our understanding of the grief of others. I'll just move on to the next part here. More seriously, refusing our vulnerability, we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence and immobilize the essential, tidal, and conversational foundations of our identity. We'll go to the last part. It's David White. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. Our choice is to inhabit vulnerability as generous citizens of loss. So this is from David White, May 2014. Vulnerability. So I gave you that quote. There's the reason I connect to this, or the reason why I wanted to talk about it with you guys, is there is just a ton of loss. Like sometimes slowing down enough to actually see our conflict, creates so much contact with loss and grief that we can't stand it. To actually stand with how vulnerable we feel, how much this moment is not like we didn't want to have a wedding where we had to worry about so-and-so melting down, you know? We didn't want to have a sense of disharmony in our family. Or we didn't want, there's just so much that, we wanted to think of ourselves as a good parent. I'm just thinking about myself and my friend group, like you want to think of yourself as a good parent. And these different labels, judgments, good parent, there are different things we do to take a step back from staying with this vulnerability. And so what I want to work with just for a second is what would it, is this making sense? Okay, all right. I never put up quotes like this because it feels too close to home a little bit for me. So, but I love David White, And I think this is actually, like if I look at my own self, like where are the things that, like it's not just a fight, but it's the persistent fight. It's the fight I have over and over. Almost always at the root, like why do I keep doing my problem? It has something to do with this unwillingness to actually be vulnerable. Like the fact is, I am attached to you, and how you feel and how you are deeply affects me. And it's often really different than what I would have liked. And I don't have any control over it. Because you are an autonomous human being, and you get to do whatever you want, really. I just have some influence. I can do my very best, and it still could very well not work out the way I want. It's so hard to stand that. And what is the skillful way to be with that? And that's why I want to talk. I think the skillful way to be with it is first to just, we did that touching. The first thing is just to slow down, soothing breathing rhythm, and touch it. Like, what is actually happening? So you guys, we did that this morning. We looked at the kind of what's the pattern, what is our initial reaction, and what might it kind of look like if we did something that was more like our A version of ourself, like how we aspire to be in that. But I think there's a deeper level of radical acceptance, like really getting, okay, powerlessness. Those of you who have a spiritual tradition, you have something to lean on here. It's like there's a way where you are not in control of the universe, really fundamentally, nor of the other person. And so to begin our interactions from that can be really helpful. So I have some other things I wanted us to do. And the one that I wanted to actually have you guys do right here is to talk amongst yourselves just a little bit. If you read this quote, all right, I'm going to give, so I debated about this, okay, you guys, and you can just veto this and talk about whatever you want in your group, all right? But this is, when I thought about what do I want to do, like when Perry asks or Karen asks or NEABPD asks, then I always think, okay, actually, there are all these people who are really struggling, and what can you do that is as risky as what they do every day? And so that's where this is coming from. But you don't have to do it, all right? But this is what I was thinking you would do at this point. You would get in either pairs or your small group, and what I'd like you to consider is, if you look at your interaction, the one that you're in, what is hard to actually accept? If you were going to be really, or say, like to actually admit out loud, you don't have to admit it out loud. But there's a certain way of, if you really were to stand vulnerable with this whole thing, the powerlessness of it, this interaction, what is actually hard? What do you maybe even avoid looking at because it's so hard? Because my own sense is what generates and keeps a conflict going often is that. So, and if you can just name it, maybe you could consider that. So that's what I would vote. If you're up for it, So I'll give you the two versions. One is following the instructions, and the other is disobeying, okay? Which I guess is a form of obeying now that I've set it up this way. So get in dyads, in pairs, okay? If you are a group of 3, you can, but whatever way fits for you. And I just decide who's first speaker. You'll have a couple minutes. And I'd just like you to think for yourself, what is actually the most vulnerable? If I was going to slow down and really let myself name what is hard about this, what is it? Just to stand with it for a second, soothing breathing rhythm. And then I'll ring the bell and you'll switch. But it's just to get with that, okay? And if you want to not do that, you can talk about whatever struck you as important from the morning. Okay, and your turn. You really have complete control over how you do this. All right? So does that work? It gives everybody a safe out if you want it. All right? All right, first speaker, just what is it that really is at the heart of this for you? Vulnerable. Go. So if you would, pausing, and just whoever was the speaker, just reflecting how, for those of you who are doing the more vulnerable one, how was that? And is there anything you're holding back where it actually might be to your benefit to speak more openly about? Just noticing. It's not a right or wrong. It's just noticing the habits we have, self-protective habits we have. It's just how it is. And so maybe just a comment about that, but then switching roles. If you're in a dyad, switch roles and continuing. The question is for those of you who are doing this one is, where is it really vulnerable? What is it actually at the heart of this that you might avoid saying, making contact with, if you see it, as you're thinking about it, about the it. What is it that's really vulnerable for you to let yourself see? And as the listener, really, your job is to make safeness happen. Your job is to make it safe for the other person to come out from under their rock if they want, And not to pressure them to come out, but to just be a patient person. You could sit by that rock all day, and they could take their time and whenever they want to come out. And then if you're not doing this, then anything for the next person that was interesting to you from the morning or any other thoughts you have, okay? So disobey in a way that works for you. All right, second person. All right, so you guys probably went whatever directions you want, but this would be one, if you have a trusted friend, counselor, whoever you actually feel safe with, you could come out from under your rock. This is one I would say, if you spend a little bit of time, what is actually your deepest fear? It might be that your person's going to die. It might be that, who knows what all your thing is, but there's a certain way where if you can contact that and find some way to stand with it and understand how you try to escape it, all the different ways you move to make it not be the case, not be vulnerable, not have to feel that. If you can really wrap your arms around that, that gives you a lot of freedom. So if you're a martial artist, getting punched a lot, it's really helpful. Because then you know what it is, it's just getting punched. And that's kind of if you can really get wow, I am just really terrified. It's back to whoever said it earlier. It's wow, I am just really needing to feel special now. Look at me go. Look at all the stuff I do. I'm so amusing when I get like this. Woo, look at that one. That was a really good one, So it's kind of to have that sense of wow, when I am really terrified, all I want to do is control you, When you lock the bathroom door, what can I say? Every past incident just plays through my mind. I know I am a nutcase. I am so sorry. Could you just leave the bathroom door unlocked and slightly cracked? So I can just walk by and make sure that everything is okay without getting in your face. I know it drives you crazy. I know things are different. My brain is just my brain. I freak out. It's like that, but being able to describe it, in a way that is non-judgmental of you and yet starts to observe your limits. And that's where we're going to get to next, okay? So I put up here, I mentioned Paul Gilbert. Did I mention Paul Gilbert? Compassion Focused Therapy. I want to tell you guys about this, all right? So because there's some very good self-help-ish books out there. And as you can probably tell, my stance is that if we can move deeper into acceptance, all good things follow. Like most of us are pretty good at change and asking and demanding and, and whatnot. But if we could get more grounded in acceptance, we'd all be more effective. And so there's a guy, Paul Gilbert is one, compassion-focused therapy. I think his book is Compassionate Mind Training. That's a more book for therapists. Can't remember the last version of it. You might look at that one before you buy it and see if it's more therapist-y or not. But then I have two friends who have other books out that are, I think, super approachable. Russell Koltz, Kolts, Russell Koltz. He has one that's more on anger. And so if you are yourself somebody who struggles with anger, or if your loved one does, that can be super helpful. It's just has very helpful tips on that. And then if you're more on the shy end, more on the anxious shy end, then Lynn Henderson has a great book on social anxiety. So if that's more where you might benefit, you might look at those guys' books. It's compassion-focused therapy. But what the piece I wanted to bring forward for you that can help just as you're in your tough moments is their idea about how we are wired as humans. And if you can really kind of get that in your mind, it can open your perspective where you just feel more compassionate toward yourself and toward whoever you're in a conflict with. So here's the gist. I'm just going to hit the gist of this one. They argue that we have, again, this is a big generalization, all right, but just this is their argument. We have three major ways we regulate, that we kind of organize ourselves around emotions and that's hardwired. That we have one system that is about anger, anxiety, disgust, and it's threat-focused. In other words, our brains are wired to detect threat, to remember threat. So if something threatening has ever happened, your brain remembers it more. It brings it up to you better. You have better recall for bad events. You're kind of more quick to respond to bad events. There's a whole way that we are threat-focused, and the idea here is it's better safe than sorry. So we are all wired for better safe than sorry brains. So the first little hint, like you see an interaction happening, and your person gives you that they start to raise their eyebrow, whammo, your whole system is organized to protect you from the threat that may come if they finish their sentence, And we can't help it. Like our brains are actually wired to detect threat, something that's predicted threat in the past. Here it shows up, even a whiff of it, you're all organized, ready to defend yourself. Better safe than sorry, okay? So disgust moves us away from things that might be dangerous to us, anxiety, anger, etc. Then there's a whole set of, and that's the one I want to talk to you about more, but then there's a whole set of things that are more about drive, achievement, goal, attainment sort of stuff. And then this last one I want to talk to you about is content, safe, connected. This is the affiliative emotions. And this is creating a sense of soothing and safeness. And what the basic part of their argument is that you really have to actively bring on board the soothing and safeness system. It's not enough to just get the threat down. Okay, so can I give you an example? Because this is, if we are having a conversation, it is a past stressful sort of thing, you're girded for battle. You know what I mean? So I say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about as soon as I say that, right? You probably even know if we're in a relationship, you probably, as soon as I start to approach you with a certain look on my face, you're already like, what's coming, So if you say, and then you're not planning to do your problem behaviors. You're not going to do your half of the it. You actually are all shaped up. You practiced and you're coming in clean, and it's going to be good. But that's not enough for your other person to lay down put their dukes down. You actually have to upregulate safeness. You have to do things that create safety, that communicate it's okay to come out from under the rock. And the part about this is, I would argue, one of the first and best ways to do it is to actually get your own safeness system going. So if you think about a wild animal, a feral cat, for example, have you ever tried to hold a feral cat? That's how I am when certain emotions are really strong. And so if you're going to be helpful to me and soothe me, it's such a tough thing because you have to kind of contain me so I don't escape, but you cannot squeeze me one bit or I will really get you. So it's a hard dance, but if you were going to create a safe environment for me as your feral cat, what would you do? You would breathe really slow and steady. You would have such a steady feeling in your arms. You would make no sudden moves. If you've ever sat someplace where a wild animal approaches you and you have the food on your hand, you're just there. There's no demand. So if you think about your body state, like what is required before you enter into any of these sort of conflict-y its that we've been talking about, could you start to radiate that type of safeness? Can you kind of imagine that? Like really imagining your partner in your fight. You approach it with that type of safeness. You are like the sun shining in all things equally, you know? Can you kind of imagine what that might look like? What these guys would argue is you actually have to do that. If you want new learning to happen, like, hey, this is a new moment, this is not that old threat moment, this is a new moment, you need to get the other person's safeness system going and also your safeness system going so that you can kind of process and tag that emotionally as, this is different. If the threat system is online, all you really keep seeing is threat, and more threat. Oh, this is different, but the threat is coming in just a second. As soon as I let, you really have to raise up the safeness. Does this concept making sense? So if you ever have been around horses, if you start to reach toward them too soon, or a wild dog, if you make that initial move too quick, it's over. They're gone. They bolted. So you really have to be patient, set up your body state, and create safeness, and move from that spot. Okay? There's a lot of good things that can come from that, but that's just a basic idea. This is my, when I was first learning this, these are my compassion-focused therapy dogs. This is how I was remembering it when I was first learning it. I have a lot of this guy, this German Shepherd. It's just kind of very alert. Nothing is really going to happen that I'm not going to pick up. It's very, my threat system, it's not too anxious, but it's really alert, that sort of thing. And then I have this dog's one for me is like, this is a sled dog's like, I love working hard, put me in the, and I get very focused in that way, so that's mine. And then this guy, that's safeness, the puppy belly up safeness. And so what I'm arguing is can you create that kind of an environment for yourself and for your loved one or whomever is in your it? Where really you both could be belly up and you didn't have to worry about getting gotten. What would that look like? All right? And now I'm not saying, sometimes it's not appropriate to get belly up. Like some dogs will bite you. So you have to know. But what I'm working toward with you guys, this concept is, what if we embraced this it? What if this was our life's work? This is a perverse thing, but I have to say, the older I get, the more I feel like these things that are so difficult, I'm grateful because it pushes me. It pushes me to be a better person. It pushes me deeper into my own beliefs about what matters to be on the planet and what I want to be about. And so what I'm arguing is, what if you were going to embrace your it as a chance to actually step up and grow and do it different? Now, this is one of those ones where for sure you can disobey. You could do this. You could just, in your mind, say whatever you want. Okay? But what I'm really saying is, what if it was really the case that when we saw the first trigger coming, we said, here it comes. And it was an embracing. Something good is going to happen. Just an openness. Can you imagine? This is, again, I'm offering you ideas, so I'm going to give you an idea, okay? This is one of my favorite ones when I am in these moments that's coming out of this. So imagine you're it, right? You had it earlier, you're a person. This is all going to be in the privacy of your own mind. Your other person who does this conflict with you is coming towards you, and they're going to do their thing, okay? They are going to do their thing. Soothing breathing rhythm, just yourself, just imagining. Whatever is soothing for you. And the sun is shining on you, and there's nothing you have to do about this thing, because it's in your imagination, right? It's not happening, really. even though your threat system has already got you going probably. Yeah? But just soothing. Sun is shining. And doing what you can to cultivate in your body safeness. Okay? So that may be on your side an image, but for me, the way I start to do it, so if you, I'll just give you the way I do it when it's really hard. So there you are. Can you feel how your body is already starting to, your person's just about to do the thing that starts you off? Can you feel how your body would be? What I like to imagine is, right at that point, I step out of my body, I freeze the frame, and then who steps in instead is whoever is, so I'm going to ask you guys, the most wise, kind, compassionate person you know, okay? Or a spiritual figure, or like a past teacher or a coach that has been really super, but somebody who you know just handles these sorts of things beautifully. Do you guys have an image of who might be good? It can be, it can be a religious or spiritual person too, like all of a sudden they step in. But imagine them in your mind's eye, they step into your body and they continue from that. Just for a second, you can close your eyes for a second actually. How would it be, just you freeze the frame, you stepped out, they stepped in, and then that person has the interaction. Can you kind of imagine that? That's what I do when I'm really, really stuck. Thich Nhat Hanh shows up. He's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who did a bunch of work with, he was in Vietnam when the Vietnam War was going on, and so he was there when the Vietnam monks were burning themselves, self-immolation and stuff in protest of the war, and he was quite involved with all the reconciliation. And he is a guy who knows how to be an intense conflict in a peaceful manner. So he steps in when I'm having these moments. And he is so wise. It goes so much better when he comes in. So I'm going to just say this one to you, but this one you can actually do in the privacy of your own mind, and I would suggest it as like a morning meditation or an evening sort of thing. Give yourself, 10, 15 minutes. Really let yourself kind of get up to the point where it gets tough. Step out and allow that other person, like you could just be a bystander, you could watch, how would they do that interaction? What would they say? What would they do? What would they see? And then you'll be surprised, like, who is that really? That's you really, right? That's all your mind generating all that wisdom, really. And so you can call upon your wise mind. Sometimes, like if I try to call on my wise mind feels small. But if I step out and let, wisdom show up, somebody else, then it really gets good fast. Yeah? So that would be another takeaway. Does that make sense? Okay. I don't want to have you do that one just because it would take a while, and some of you guys, you can't do it really when you're this close to people. You have to be by yourself. So, but I'd really encourage you to give that one a try. But it's the spirit of is it embracing. It really, this whatever your it is, it could transform you into a much better person, a deeper person, a more compassionate person, a person who could be of great benefit. The way you said it earlier is like you could actually be of great benefit. I know some of you actually have already started doing this because you've moved into leading some of the family connection groups, But the pain that you have, if you figure out how to do anything, even remotely skillful, it's a benefit to others if you share it. So that's one, just a pitch, so that you could do like that. Did that just move? Yeah. Oh, like that. That's what I'm saying. So your person could come and you could embrace the whole thing. Okay. So in essence, what I'm saying is there's your ideas about the moment, and then there's the actual moment. Like I would like to have a harmonious home. I'm not having a harmonious home. But that is it. And I can actually, even as these things move around and they're not connected, I can approach that with this sense of, that's how it is right now. That really is how it is. It's not some other moment. This is the moment. This is the hand of cards. So now we're going to move into change. But what I want us to do is, if you can bring all the stuff that we worked on so far to then making your request for change, that's what we're going to next, okay? You're actually starting to look a little tired, I have to say, like you could use some food. All right, am I reading you right? At least some of you? Okay, so I'm just gonna tell you, we have just a little while longer, not long, okay? But this is the part where you're gonna make your request for change. So as we move into making requests for change, you may say, I disagree with you, or I want you to do X, or you're going to say no. What I'm saying is the stance you are making any of that change-oriented stuff from is, okay, this is how things are right now. All of what we just did, like however you actually are, however the situation actually is, you're just touching it gently, not pushing it, it's just like, okay, that is how it is, and connected. We are in this together. So that's that kind of embracing sort of thing. And then we're going to work on observing limits, okay? This is the change-oriented portion of the program because sometimes things really need to change. In DBT, there's a difference between setting versus observing limits. In DBT, the idea is that you observe your limits rather than set them. Setting means you're kind of constraining, stopping the other person's maladaptive, like what they're doing wrong, you're trying to stop it by setting a limit. And that the reason that they're having problems is because they don't have the right boundaries or something like that, and that you're trying to help them learn the rules of the road by shaping them up. In DBT, it's phrased differently, and it's more about that there's not some rule about how one should be or what's reasonable to ask for or not want. It's more about observing limits is about observing your own limits and talking in terms of poorness of fit. So this is another way of translating judgments. We're going to go through some examples here. But the reason you observe your limits is so that you don't burn out, that you can stay in the relationship. You're going to stop the other person transgressing your limits so that you have the kind of staying power to hold for the distance. So concretely, a lot of limits come from differences. So like my daughter is a night owl and I'm an early bird, okay? So the time where she might want or need support and me to talk with her about something that's on her mind is right when I'm going to sleep. So and it's just a difference between us. I'm winding down, she's winding up. And so around 9 o'clock, as I would like to be going to sleep, she arrives in my bedroom to have a heart-to-heart, right? So that's an interpersonal difference that can actually, it's a small thing on one hand, but it can cause inordinate problems, right? Like if I then go to sleep, then she feels like I'm never there for her because I'm really literally never there for her because I'm going to sleep right when she most needs me, Whereas if I stay up, then what happens? I don't do good with less sleep, so then my whole next day. So it's a kind of interpersonal difference that's normal. Like it's normal to be a night owl, it's normal to be an early bird. It just happens to be different. Same around privacy. Some of us are more private. Some of us are more non-private, sharing. Same around shows of affection. Some of us really don't like public shows of affection. Others of us think that we aren't being loved if there's not public shows of affection. So I'm just thinking of like one of my first boyfriends walking in a grocery store and he's wanting to put his arm around me. I'm like, you don't do that. And that kind of like difference can be so painful. The way you express emotion, where you might want it more low key or in certain situations low key, and another person is way more, out there, extroverted. So these types of differences can really cause pain and sometimes give rise to having to observe your limits around them. So it's really important that we learn how to interact productively. So like me and my daughter, we've had to figure out our dance about who stays up and who mentions things earlier in the day. Like how do we do this dance to somehow find something that's going to work? But where we observe each other's limits. And that's not reasonable that it all goes my way or it all goes hers, but it takes a conversation to work it out. And so if you think about your conflicts, is there any way in which this kind of just difference along some dimension fits? Can you think of, anybody got some examples here about how you're just different? Was there, yeah.
Yeah, so in my conflict, it's an extrovert-introvert conflict, and the extrovert is more emotional, the introvert is less emotional, and there's judgment and interpretation, misinterpretation that happens.
Does that people hear that one? That's a really common one. Yeah, it's a great example. Yeah, so, and to be able to just describe that, it does not mean I don't love you. It does not mean you're doing it wrong when you want to retreat and sit in your chair and have me say nothing to you for several hours when you get home. I hate it, but it doesn't make you a bad person. Yeah, that's a great example. Yes?
Well, my dad always
Yes.
we haven't met our
That's another great one. Like, so the person feels you moving away. It's their last chance to kind of tell you the most important thing, and you have no time. Yeah, that's a great one. And then, but it's a normal thing. Like, some people, they feel you leaving, and that is when they need you to come back. And you're just going to come back and make some contact, and even though you're late. But if you don't, then it feels like you don't care enough, right, to make time for him. So it's just these little things, they end up sort of escalating into really big things. And so how to describe them non-judgmentally is super important. So what I'd like you to do, now we're in the last stretch of our work together. What change do you need to make in whatever your conflict? What would you say if you were going to ask for a no? If you were going to say no, or you are going to ask for a change, like don't worry about being skillful here, okay? We're among friends. Just what do you actually need to go different in that? Can you think of something? So this is pairing back up, and I just like each person to just kind of quickly try to identify what would you ask, or what do you need to say no to, or what would be the change you would request, okay? Just really thinking about in that, like what would it be? And if there is something that's about this different, so like, for example, with my daughter, I would have to say something like, listen, honey, we have to find some different way where you don't come and tell me your most hard things right as I'm going to sleep. The other thing she loves is to go for a drive. I can't go for a drive at 9:30. It wakes me up, and then I'm just like done for. So it can't always go like that, but sometimes it could. So how could we work this out? But it's not she's a bad person, it's not I'm a bad person, it's that we have a difference. So if you can phrase it like that, give it a try. Would you give that a try? Yeah, in your groups? So just trying to come up with what is it you would ask, and then we'll spiff you up in a little bit, but just getting the heart of what you want to ask for or what you need to say no to in your conflict, okay? Give it a try. Wrapping up the thought you're on. Okay. So my hunch is that you just got some of the way into this, right? Probably you just got some of the way into this, and it may be very complicated to actually figure out, what is it you really want to go different here. But I would just say, I didn't put this one up, I just made this, but you're figuring out what you're going to ask or what you're going to say no. If that's kind of the basic thing usually, you're asking for something to go different or what you have to say no to. And then if you skip ahead to page 9, in DBT, there's a big emphasis on skills. And this is Dear Man at the top of that page. Make a Dear Man request. Okay. Oh, is that what yours is, 9? Yeah. So if you haven't had this skill, it's just a nice little acronym. I'm going to tell it to you quick. We're not going to go into it in detail, but it just can help you organize your thoughts. And the first thing is you describe the situation you find yourself in. Listen, when you come in that late at night, when I'm that sleepy, I'm not, or when you say it at the end right before I'm leaving, or all those sort of different things. And then you express. And what you want with the description, by the way, is non-judgmental. You want the other person nodding their head like, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay? So it can't be described in a way that's just, your view of it. It has to be like a shared, they would nod their head, yes, I know exactly it. And then you express why it's important. Like, why are you even going to say no, or why are you going to ask for something? Sort of like how you are feeling about this whole thing. short, sweet, to the point, just the essence, so that it doesn't turn into a whole, thing. And then you assert, you make your request. Like, what is it that you're going to say no to, or what are you going to do to ask for? And then reinforce, this is what's in it for them if they do what you want. Like, I will be so much better at listening to you if we began this conversation just a few hours earlier. Or whatever it would be on your, like, I know what you want as a sense of closeness. Like, the other difference for my family is I hate to shop, like, and I'm just not a girly girl, but my daughter really loves to shop and she likes to do makeup and that. So on the Seahawks game, I let her put makeup on. on me. I like it one eye on the game. She does the other eye. We find our way through it. So, like, reinforce is saying what's in it for them. If you could just, give me a break on this one, yes, I will submit to being made up. Okay. She's really good, though, I have to say. Okay, so that's that. But I just want to point this to you, okay? There are some really helpful, if you don't already have it, the DBT Skills Manual is a really great one for parents. And if you haven't done a family connections group, I think that that's another one. You would get lots of rehearsal about how to put together your requests or your no's. It's super helpful. And then, so that's kind of getting your thoughts in order to make your request. But the other thing I wanted to, do you know this one, Quicksand Kitty? Need to think fast. Like, for most of us, we're in our it again. Like, before we know it, we're dysregulated. Like, we've done all our prep, we're about to say it, and what do? They in essence flip the finger. Like, they do something that throws us off our game. And so I think you have to plan for the worst case, for it not going smoothly, for you really not being at your best, even though you did your best to plan for it. And so I think it's really helpful to know regulation, emotion regulation on your part is not suppression. It's much more about figuring out where along, I'm going to show you a very complicated thing, but I'm going to put the process model in here, okay? This is a guy named James Gross. For those of you who don't mind more academic reading, he's another guy that's really worth reading. I put the reference in there if you Google it, Google Gross and Thompson. Regulating your emotion is an actual very complicated thing that you're doing when you're doing it. And so what I would say to you guys is really think about when is the best situation selection, when is the best time to have a difficult conversation? Like, be smart, set it up so that you and the other person are at your best. How can you modify the situation? Like, what would make it be a belly up, warm, safe situation? What could you do that would actually set up the situation so that it could be that way? That's what situation modification is. Modify things. If it's easier to have the conversation without the siblings around, do that. If it's easier to do it when you've had a glass of wine, do that. Not two, probably, though. And then attentional deployment. So that just means, where do you put your attention while you're in this? Putting your attention in all the ways it's gone badly in the past is probably not useful, right? Putting your attention on something else. So I'm just thinking, like, I had one mom who had a real high conflict with her ex and needed to have some conversations about how they were going to arrange pickup and drop off and stuff like that. She really had to put her attention firmly on the fact that this is the father of her child and always will be. Like, there's no undoing it. And what matters most to her is that somehow her child has the very best that can be made out of this bad situation. And it was really a bad situation. So she just had a mantra, and she had a necklace. I forget what the word was on there. And so when she would start to have a hard conversation with him, she just held the necklace. And her attention was on that intent. So you may really have to ignore quite a bit and only put your attention on the piece. But so you can see, regulating your emotion is really complicated. There's a lot of steps. I'm not going to even talk about the last ones. I think those first ones are sufficient. But this is, I wanted to point this out to you guys because I know some of you guys actually do get into doing more academic reading. James Gross, really worthwhile. And then there's a subsequent article that I put in the reference section from Linehan, Bohus, and Lynch. You'll see a little, let me tell you what page it's on. Again, just for those of you guys who like to read. It is Linehan, Bohus, and Lynch, 2007. What they did is they put that model that's up here now with the DBT skills for therapists. This is another great one for you guys too. It tells you, you can only, some skills, when you're most dysregulated, you can't use things that make you think. You know, you can't think when it's not like you can do pros and cons when you're most dysregulated. Okay, that's the time where you just do soothing breathing rhythm. Like your brain's not working, it's not your friend. So that's another one, just to point it out to you. But I want to just leave you with, is that okay? I just want to point, some of you guys like to read, so those are what I would say you should read. Okay. So I want to just leave you with the last bit. So we talked some about this, but my hope is that when you leave, in your next moment where you're in your you've done a little prep, maybe you did a little prep now, but I think if you can be, even if you're just more present to what is happening as you're going through it, that can be really helpful. So this kind of, my mantra is, what is happening right now, and can I be with it? Usually I add, can I be with it skillfully? You know, what is happening right now, and can I be with it? So that soothing breathing rhythm that we did, I'm just trying to describe to myself, like, what is happening in myself, what is happening in the other person, and can I be with this? And so when I'm really at my most difficult, I often will just do this gesture, you know, that kind of, I might put my hand here, or I might just hold my own hands here. And the spirit of it is just being with it. Like, I'm just trying to be a soothing, calming presence to myself, to the other, while we're in this difficult moment that's unavoidable. Like, it's just where we are right now. This is what's happening. And I may tread water for a long time like that, inhibiting all of my habitual problematic behaviors. So you may have a different gesture that works for you, but this one is my go-to. All right. Well, I hope there was some takeaway in there for you. I appreciated your attention, and really, it's a privilege to come and be with you guys. So thank you very much.